on an incredible career. Thank you for the inspiration and dedication on and off the field. Look forward to seeing what's next at Drew Brees. Of course, those two going back to their days competing against each other in the Big Ten. Russell Wilson lives nearby Drew Brees in San Diego during the offseason. They spent a lot of time together. Saints, amazing career. Drew Brees, legend. Thanks for all you did for me and the game. Hashtag HOF. And of course, an Austin, Texas high school football legend, Drew Brees, is fellow Austin native Baker Mayfield tweeting this out. Congratulations on an unbelievable career. Drew Brees, thank you for inspiring a kid from Austin to chase his dreams. We're now joined by our pals, Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Ian, Tom, we saw this coming, it seems, the entire offseason, but Ian, it is now official.
Yeah, it is official now. Obviously, significant news for the New Orleans Saints, for Drew Brees, and for the entire NFL. But the writing has been on the wall for the New Orleans Saints. Even going into the season, the Saints knew that it would probably be Drew Brees' last season. In fact, last year when he announced on Instagram that he'd be coming back, at that point they thought, all right, one more year, run it back, try to make a run at the Super Bowl, and then see what happens after that. And we got a really good indication about what Drew Brees' plans for and what the team had planned before the Super Bowl when they redid his contract. They took him down to a minimum base salary for 2021, then spread the salary cap hit over for the next couple years. It's going to count about $11 million, a little more over the next 2 years. But of course, Brees was never going to play for just the minimum. That was an indication that the team was moving on and Drew Brees was moving on as well. Tom, we know that Brees also is going to have quite a nice career after the NFL, already has a contract with NBC to be a broadcaster. It was really just about him coming to grips with this, understanding that his life in football as a player was over, and just when he was going to announce it. Of course, that day was today.
And Ian, Drew Brees only wanted to be a New Orleans Saint. So regardless of any other opportunities that might have been out there, he never had eyes on potentially finishing up his career someplace else. So through all the workout videos and things that raised questions in recent weeks, people close to Brees as well as the Saints really never had any type of an idea that he might be reconsidering and coming back. You mentioned that contract restructure. Well, the way that works is the Saints have to keep Brees on the roster into June. Once you get past June 1st, then they can put him on the reserve retired list, keeping a good chunk of that dead cap hit in 2022. So when you still see Brees on the roster over the next few months, Omar, don't sweat it. It's not a sign of anything. It's strictly to help out the Saints cap, which of course is still undergoing surgery.
That's a massive hole he's leaving on that roster, Ian. Where do the Saints go from here at the quarterback position?
Well, they're going to look internally first, and of course they still have Taysom Hill on the roster, who last year did have a couple starts to, let's say, up and down results for the New Orleans Saints. But my understanding is the likely starter, Tom, for 2021 is going to be Jameis Winston, who, by the way, is not under contract with the New Orleans Saints. They'd still like to work out a deal with Jameis to return, a deal that limits the risk, doesn't cost a ton of money. We know they don't have a lot of cap space, but does allow him to maximize his upside in New Orleans. They loved what they saw behind the scenes from Jameis Winston in practice. It's just a matter of seeing it out on the game field, and likely that is what we will see this coming season.
And Ian, expect that new contract for Jameis Winston to look pretty similar to the one that Cam Newton just signed in New England in terms of a low base pay and a bunch of incentives if he wins the starting job and ends up playing well. As for Taysom Hill, he is under contract for 2021, due a little over $12 million. In case anyone watching is confused by a push alert they got on their phone earlier, no, Taysom Hill has not signed a contract extension. Repeat, Taysom Hill has not signed a contract extension. They added 4 voidable hit into the future, something the Saints are doing with practically everybody on their roster right now who's not making the minimum. Omar?
Once again, he did not sign a $140 million extension. Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, thank you very much. Eli Manning, a New Orleans native, tweeting this out. It was a pleasure to compete against you. Welcome to retirement. So joining that exclusive fraternity, of course, Drew Brees, a second-round pick of the Chargers back in 2001. Let's say hello to the man drafted in the first round that year of the Chargers draft, LaDainian Tomlinson, along with San Diego native Terrell Davis and our general manager, Scott Pioli. Of course, LT, will start with you. Drew Brees gets credit for turning around the New Orleans Saints franchise, deservedly so. But when you guys got to San Diego, the Chargers were coming off some lean years. What do you remember about those conversations with Drew back in those days?
Well, I remember the first conversation Drew and I had. It was actually after the draft, and they fly you into your new city. We both flew into San Diego that night, that evening after the draft, or it could have been the following day. Anyhow, we got to the airport at the same time when we arrived, and the first thing that Drew said to me is, hey, I know that this organization has had some down years, but you and I together, we're going to turn this organization around. We're going to become a championship team. And just the determination that he had, the discipline that he had to succeed, this guy exhausted everything that he had to be successful. And obviously early on in his career with San Diego, you know, he went through the ups and downs. But in my mind, there was never a moment that I thought he wasn't good enough to play in the National Football League. In fact, I always knew that he would turn into a Hall of Fame player because I saw the work ethic. I saw the leadership qualities that he possessed. He was one of a kind, and he even pushed me as we worked out time to time in the offseason. He would push me and get me better. So this guy was just incredible, and I was a better player getting to play with Drew Brees.
When did you know that, LT? Of course, you mentioned the up-and-down career there in San Diego for those 5 years. When did you know that he would be a Hall of Famer?
Well, we saw glimpses of it early, and I'll tell you, I know his rookie year he did not start, but I remember one particular game where he flashed his ability, and that was against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs were beating us pretty good that day, and Doug Flutie was the quarterback. Drew Brees came into the game, and he almost led us back on a huge comeback. As a young kid at that time, he was on fire. The anticipation that he had throwing the football, he was able to lead receivers into windows. He had vision like no other. I heard Rich Eisen talking about the stature of Drew Brees, and yes, he was only 6 feet, but he always found a way to throw in those windows. Through 6'5" linemen, he was able to generate, you know, so many different plays with his legs and also getting out of the pocket, but finding the windows within the pocket. That's where he really was impressive.
Well, that stature, why he fell to the second round there in 2001. Scott Pioli, you scouted him when he was coming out for the draft. What were your impressions of Drew Brees?
Well, in the fall of 2000, I went out to West Lafayette, Indiana, because I was looking at an offensive lineman. We had to rebuild our offensive lines at the New England Patriots and our defensive line. So while I was out there, by the way, they had this quarterback by the name of Drew Brees. And I'm telling you, watching him, you know, LT just talked about his work ethic. Well, I'll tell you what, he had work ethic, he had work habits, he had passion, he had energy. The way that he led the team in practice that day that I was there was remarkable. You could see all the things that made him such a great pro and a Hall of Fame pro. His attention to detail, his energy, his focus was infectious throughout the team. And his co-captain, Matt Light, was the guy that we ended up drafting in the second round of that same draft that he was picked in the second round. But I tell you what, I will never forget that day out at Purdue and getting to see that entire team and seeing how Drew Brees and Matt Light were head and shoulders above so many other people. It was one of the best trips that I've ever made on a scouting visit. And again, we weren't necessarily looking at the quarterback because, oh, by the way, the year before we had drafted a quarterback out of Michigan who was starting to work his way through the ranks. But I tell you what, again, I cannot tell you how well his teammates responded to him on the field in every drill, in everything that he did. He was just so focused, and it was clear he was prepared. Coach Tiller was out there, but Drew Brees was running that offense and running that practice that day.
TD, what are your impressions of Drew Brees as he says goodbye after 20 years?
Well, I think initially, when Drew Brees got drafted to the Chargers, I thought that he was going to have a short career because the guy would go back in the pocket and he's looking through his face mask at the bottom of his face mask. You know, you can't even see it through the normal, face mask. And I thought he was going to have a short career. But as his career started to unfold, there was something clearly special about Drew Brees. You know, you watch him in the games, the clutch throws that he was making. The guy, when you talk to people around the Chargers, they talk about his character on the field. And I remember one time we were coming back from Atlanta, and it was a flight that I was on, and Drew Brees was on the same flight. And it was, that's a 4.5-hour flight, 5-hour flight. And as soon as we get to San Diego, I'm walking off the plane, and Drew Brees comes up, and he introduces himself to me. And I didn't see him in first class. And I was like, man, were you in first class? He's like, no, I was sitting back there and coach. And to me, that struck me. That I was like, there's no way in the world I'm going to be sitting back there and coach flying 4.5 hours from Atlanta. But it told me that he don't really, he doesn't care about that. Like, this dude is a genuine, authentic person that doesn't matter. He's back there with, and coach, man, to me, that struck me as kind of cool, man. And so, I don't know, it stuck with me for a long time, but it gave me a lot of respect for Drew Brees after kind of seeing him back there on that flight, man.
I remember speaking to offensive coordinator of the Raiders currently, Greg Olson, who is Brees' quarterbacks coach at Purdue. And to your point, Scott, all those things that we've heard about his legendary workout and his work ethic in the NFL, all things that he was doing back in West Lafayette, back in college at Purdue. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. This brings back our video from James Palmer taking a look back at the Superdome in January after Tom's season and taking a look at that before and after of Brees and Sean Payton. Their won-loss percentage overwhelmingly a number of losing seasons there before Sean Payton and Drew Brees arrived in the 2000s.